Donald Trump's on an official state visit to the United Kingdom, visiting King Charles, and the people of the United Kingdom are once again making certain that he knows they don't want him there. As he approached Windsor Castle last night in Marine One, a giant projection lit up the side of Windsor Castle with him and his best buddy Jeff. On the grounds around Windsor Castle were giant posters of him and his best buddy Jeff. This is in addition to Channel 4 that is running broadcasts of his untruths that are being actively fact-checked as they're being replayed on TV. See, the people of the United Kingdom this year alone have already told Donald Trump multiple times that neither him or J.D. Vance are welcome in their country and they want him to leave. Whether it's the people of Scotland taking craps in his golf holes, or it's the people in and around London actively protesting him being there and calling out their own governments for spending their money on welcoming Donald Trump to the country. Nobody in the United Kingdom likes Donald Trump. They might actually like him less than the people of the United States.
Forget politics. Trump and King Charles III just put on a masterclass in diplomacy at a royal banquet. Inside the 1,000-year-old Windsor Castle, President Trump and King Charles III just celebrated the special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. in one of the most lavish state banquets in recent memory. In a speech that would be unimaginable for most modern leaders, President Trump showered Britain with praise. He said our two countries are linked by eternal bonds, calling them two verses of the same poem. He even credited the British Empire with laying the foundations of law, liberty, and free speech in America. The king reciprocated with his own warm toast, getting several laughs out of the president by joking about how far the U.S. and Britain have come since 1776, and even quipped that British soil makes for rather splendid golf courses. This was more than just a fancy dinner. This was a carefully orchestrated display of unity and shared history. From the menu featuring quail eggs and chicken valentine to a special 1945 port served in honor of the 45th president, every detail was designed to reinforce one powerful message. The bond between America and the United Kingdom is, in Trump's words, irreplaceable and unbreakable.
Donald Trump announced on Monday evening, just hours after the New York Times released a bombshell expose about potential corruption involving his crypto industry. But Trump announced on Monday that he was suing the New York Times for so very many lies that he says defamed him over the years. And he's suing for $15 billion. Now, before I even go any further, before I even read to you what Donald Trump wrote, it is important for every single person to understand this lawsuit is not about defamation. This lawsuit is not because Donald Trump thinks he can win it. This lawsuit is yet another attempt by Donald Trump to not only silence the media, but get them to fall in line with his administration. Okay? It's not because they lied. It's not because he thinks he'll get $15 billion. It's not even because he thinks he'll win the case. It's an intimidation tactic to get them to stop reporting negative stories about him. And I don't know how the New York Times is going to respond, but maybe they cave like Paramount and ABC and CBS, or maybe they go the Rupert Murdoch route of all people and stand their ground and say, see you in court, a-hole. But either way, here is what Donald Trump said on Truth Social. Today, I have the great honor of bringing a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country, becoming a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. You know, there's a lot more, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you're going to sue somebody for defamation, when you announce the lawsuit, it's probably smart to not also defame them, which is exactly what you just did. You spouted a bunch of lies that are, in fact, going to influence people, that are, in fact, going to impact the readership of the New York Times. Like, that's textbook defamation lawsuit. Statement from an individual that leads to a decline in revenue, statements that are not true, statements that are malicious. Boom, New York Times right now has a massive opportunity to countersue you, and they'd actually win. And that, of course, is the route they should take. But he continues. I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. Their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page of the New York Times, something heretofore unheard of. Heretofore? Where did you learn that word, buddy?
Canada just handed Donald Trump a huge L in his own trade war as they put him in the find out phase. Now, as you know, Donald Trump has put the U.S. in a global trade war, and he has been especially critical of Canada, thinking Canada would just sit back and take it. Well, Canada has been working deals with other countries, and for the first time since the 1990s, they have purchased more cars from Mexico than the United States. Now, this is exactly the problem with Donald Trump and this trade war. That while eventually Canada is going to have to come to the table and they're going to have to make a deal, in the meantime, they are creating new trade lanes. And now that money that has left the United States and gone to Mexico isn't coming back when this is over. Instead, they will continue to spend that money with Mexico just in case another Donald Trump comes along. And this is exactly why everybody warned Donald Trump and Trump voters that he would ruin the economy. And we are seeing it now. And while this is a huge L for Donald Trump, it's an even bigger one for the United States.
So what did Donald Trump say when he sat down with a presidential historian? Well, he said something that hopefully will be introduced as evidence against him in his future criminal trial. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So historian, author, and Princeton professor Julian Zelizer interviewed Donald Trump for the history books at Donald Trump's request. I highly recommend an article that was authored by Professor Zelizer. It's published in The Atlantic, and I will put a link to the article in the description of this video. Now, I want to quote from the article kind of extensively, so please hang with me for a minute, because not surprisingly, after I'm done, I want to talk about the legal implications of something Donald Trump said to Professor Zelizer. So Professor Zelizer's article, as published in The Atlantic, is titled, "What I Learned When Trump Tried to Correct the Record." And that article begins, "As an academic historian, I never expected to find myself in a video conference with Donald Trump. But one afternoon last summer, a day after C-SPAN released a poll of historians who ranked him just above Franklin Pierce, Andrew Johnson, and James Buchanan, our country's worst chief executives, he popped up in a Zoom box and told me and some of my colleagues about the 45th presidency from his point of view. Our conversation with the former president underscored common criticisms, that he construed the presidency as a forum to prove his deal-making prowess, that he sought flattery and believed too much of his own spin, that he dismissed substantive criticism as misinformed, politically motivated, ethically compromised, or otherwise cynical. He demonstrated a limited historical view. He talked, not surprisingly, about the leaders of China, North Korea, and Russia. And then this piece, which is especially offensive when talking about the president of South Korea, quote, in telling the story, he imitated the accent of South Korean President Moon Jae-in.
So it just came down that Donald Trump wants to remove a very famous photograph of a slave with scars across his back from any American museum or institution. I find this completely abhorrent and disgusting. Now, he thinks, like a complete idiot, that somehow this makes America look bad. And it is quite the opposite. The Civil War and what we overcame and how the United States became a nation that abolished slavery is not only core to our identity, but it is one of the greatest stories of human triumph, in modern history. This is the new birth of freedom described in the Gettysburg Address. And I will tell you, as someone who was forced to live in South Africa under apartheid, my dad kidnapped me when I was a little kid for like 2 to 3 years, and I had to live under a totalitarian state until, Interpol came and got me back to the United States. I think You can't lie about your history. You have to be real about it. And the fact that he's trying to do this is the most un-American thing I can possibly imagine. I'm going to get a picture of this famous slave, and I'm going to put it up in my studio at home when I make videos for my YouTube channel. Just like I have a picture of Malcolm X looking out the window holding a rifle, standing up against oppression. It's just so wrong. It's so gross.
On his way out to the UK, Donald Trump admitted on live TV that he's really going to do it. He's going to go after media outlets he doesn't like. He was departing the White House for this UK trip, stopped to talk with reporters, and he was asked, what about this whole thing of going after hate speech? And Trump says, well, what that means is we might go after you. He said this to ABC's Jonathan Karl. Any news that treats me unfairly, we might go after. Take a look at this dystopian nightmare. This is chilling stuff. Here is this is terrifying. This is like red alert stuff. And I know that when everything's a scandal, nothing's a scandal, but this is completely and totally terrifying. The hypocrisy is the following. Republicans have spent decades telling us there's no such thing as hate speech in America. The First Amendment protects even offensive speech. It protects ugly speech. It protects speech that we don't like. And they're right about that. They were lecturing about how the Constitution doesn't care if you don't like what somebody says. But the second that triggered Trump hears criticism,